message to Bondi. Pam Bondi, the U.S. Attorney General, release the files. The Jeffrey Epstein files, in case you need clarification. Bondi, you promised. Now, deliver. I'm Nancy Grace. This is Crime Stories. To listen to this, what the U.S. Attorney General promising, and I've got so many clips of her promising out the yin-yang, promising the release of the Epstein files, and at that point, blaming the holdup on the Southern District of New York, which I accepted. I accepted that at the time. I had no reason to disbelieve her or to believe a nefarious intent on anyone's mind, anyone, including the Southern District. But now, really? She just referred to thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of files, and now we're being told there's nothing in there, so we're not releasing them. If there's nothing in there, why not release them, Mr. Howard?
Well, this is a cover-up of epic proportions, and not just because of the national discord over the last week. That is, President Donald Trump's alleged ties to Jeffrey Epstein's. Alleged? No, we've known that for decades, and we've known that they had a friendship leading up to Epstein's 2005 investigation in Florida. Now, Trump obviously campaigned on a desire for transparency. This is the antithesis of it. The reality was that what was released in that so-called phase one of Epstein files being dumped on the American public was nothing new. What we know is that there are tens of thousands of documents related to Epstein that the Southern District of New York, a division of the Department of Justice, and the FBI are refusing to release. How do we know that? Because one of the news outlets that I own, Radar Online, first sued in 2017 the FBI for a full and frank disclosure of these documents related to that 2005 case in Florida. At the time, Nancy, we were stonewalled. Believe it or not, the Southern District of New York invoked Jeffrey Epstein's privacy rights over those of the dozens of victims at the center of that case in Florida. Then Epstein dies. Still, the Southern District of New York wouldn't release the files. Fast forward to last year, and a US judge in the Southern District hands down a verdict against the news outlet Radar Online. The verdict there was that the information contained in those files could jeopardize any potential appeal of Epstein's accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell. Well, that is now under appeal. And what is evident in our recently filed appeal is that there are more than 11,000 documents that have not been released to the public around this child sex trafficking ring. And one must ask themselves at this hour, is the rights of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell being protected over those of what the DOJ has now said are more than 1,000 victims of the Jeffrey Epstein sex trafficking ring?
Joining us tonight is a very special guest, Mark Epstein. This is the biological brother of Jeffrey Epstein, now dead. Mr. Epstein, thank you for being with us.
You're welcome.
Mark, if I may call you that.
Sure.
You have been disturbed from day one about the claim your brother, Jeffrey Epstein, committed. You say that did not happen. Why?
Well, first of all, it was sort of like almost day two. What happened when I first heard that Jeffrey was found dead from apparent suicide, I heard it on CNN. The government didn't notify me, as they claimed. I heard it on CNN. And at first, I had no reason to doubt that because, I knew he was in jail. He was potentially facing a very long term. I knew he wouldn't want to live like that. He didn't have any children to worry about. Our parents are gone, and he wouldn't have to worry about me. So there was no reason to doubt that. But then the next morning, I had to identify his body because I'm the next of kin, and they did the autopsy. And so far, the same thing. I just assumed it was a suicide. But then the city pathologist who did the autopsy, with Michael Bondi, there's forensic pathologist on my behalf, witnessing this, they both came out of the autopsy room and they said they couldn't call it a suicide because it looked too much like a homicide. Now, that never appears in any government report, and no one's speaking about that the two qualified forensic pathologists who did the autopsy could not call it a suicide because it looked too much like a homicide. And then a few days later, Barbara Sampson, who was the chief medical examiner, she declares it was a suicide. And let's be clear, Barbara Sampson never saw the body. She wasn't at the autopsy, and after the autopsy was over that day, we claimed the body. So she never saw it. Just like Cash Patel made that statement that, because he's a prosecutor and everything else, he said, it's suicide when you see it. I mean, he said that in a congressional or a Senate hearing, under oath I would take. And he said, it's suicide when you see it. The first questions that came to mind was, well, how many suicides has he seen? Okay, and also, he never saw the body. He never saw the scene. I don't think he was at the scene of the crime that day, or I don't know if he was there afterwards, but that wouldn't matter. So it's like everything seems to be covering up the fact that the pathologist who did the autopsy wouldn't call it a suicide. Other people are calling it a suicide, ignoring these very qualified professionals. Dr. Bondi has done about 500 autopsies on prison deaths, and I'm not sure how many Dr. Roman did, certainly more than Cash Patel.
With us, everyone, is Mark Epstein. This is Jeffrey Epstein's brother, who doesn't have a dog in the fight, no skin in the game to opine as to whether Epstein committed suicide or not. But what he's saying is very, very disturbing. Day one, Mark Epstein, I was concerned about the markings, and I've prosecuted and investigated many, many homicides, more than I can count, and have investigated suicides as well to determine if they were homicides. And the first thing that jumped out at me was the marking on your brother's neck, which was a straight across horizontal ligature mark. And when someone hangs themselves, even from the side of a bed, think about Robin Williams, who committed suicide by use of a ligature from a doorknob. Okay, this is not a traditional hanging, for instance, from an elevated point. Even from that type of suicide from a bed, you would see a U or a smiley marking on the neck. This was a straight horizontal ligature mark, indicative of someone strangling him with a ligature from behind. It's a subtle but important distinction, which I will discuss momentarily with a forensic expert. Let me understand, Mark Epstein, you just stated that you learned about the allegation from TV?
Yeah, I was actually in Norfolk, Virginia, having breakfast at a restaurant, and the television was on, tuned to CNN, and I saw my brother's picture appear, and they said that he was found dead from an apparent suicide. That's how I learned about this. I mean, the Justice Department report, they said they notified me. They did not. There's a lot of errors in the Justice Department report.
Why would they have lied about that?
Oh, they're trying to make it look like a suicide.
Why? Why do you believe the government? And I'm not one for conspiracies, Mark, at all. Why? Because I don't think people can keep their yaps shut long enough to maintain a conspiracy. That's why. But in this case, the refusal to release the files that were promised to us months ago, promise after promise after promise, the confusion around the homicide, the edited video. And again, we're hearing from DC, well, there's nothing in the files. Well, if there's nothing in the files, release the files. We have got, I think now, 4 connected to your brother's case. 4. Giuffre, Virginia Giuffre, your brother. his French counterpart, according to law enforcement, and 2 other alleged victims. Now, 5 people commit suicide? Can that possibly be a coincidence, Mark Epstein?
Well, there's also other things that raise the question. Like also a few days after the death, Bill Barr, the then Attorney General, came out publicly and stated that he saw the video and he saw that nobody went in or out of the tier, and that convinced him it was a suicide. And when I heard that, I thought, this is ridiculous. I thought, why is the Attorney General himself watching this whole night-long video? Couldn't he have somebody in his office watch it and say, hey, Bill, nobody went in or out? That was number one. And number two, to assume that it was a suicide because nobody went in or out when there were 12 other prisoners on that tier that would not have to go in or out of that door if they were going to kill somebody on the tier. And I was told that cell doors were left unlocked that night. And I was also told by somebody who's familiar with the prison that they weren't surprised to hear that. So, and also to think that somebody could get to Jeffrey's tier, go inside, kill somebody, and then leave completely undetected, it's just like a stupid statement. That, that's not what you base it on. We can't find out who the other prisoners on that tier were. When did they get there? And where are they now? There's been no interviews of all the prisoners on the tier, which would normally be done in a situation like that. There's no record of that. So when I heard Bill Barr say that, and then, the forensic pathologist said they couldn't call it a suicide because it looked too much like a homicide. I mean, if you just looked at the facts of this and forget it was Jeffrey Epstein and forget the case against him for a minute, this doesn't look like a suicide. You would investigate this as a homicide. And then also the night when they locked up, but there's a record of, we know about the 2 guards that got in trouble, because they weren't doing the rounds, Tobin Noel and Michael Thomas. Now, Michael Thomas came on shift in the middle of the night. So he wasn't there when they locked up the tier. And there's never ever just one guard there. So in the report, there's a mention of an unnamed guard number 1 and an unnamed guard number 2. The question is, who are they and why are they unnamed? Are they actual prison guards? Could they have been put there to kill somebody and then they disappeared into ether without any record of who they are? There's all these unanswered questions that in a normal, clear, honest case, even if it was a suicide, these questions would not be kept secret.
Joining us now is a very special guest, Spencer Coven, Chief Legal Officer, Gold Law, who has represented 9 Epstein victims. 9. Now, I've prosecuted a lot of cases, and when I would have 3 or 4 victims, that would be like an avalanche. You, a single lawyer, have represented 9, which tells me that there are many, many more out there, probably that we don't even know about. It's concerning to me, Mr. Coven, first of all, thank you for being with us, that there are 5 alleged suicides connected to this case. Does somebody in this universe want me to believe that 5 people connected to this case all committed suicide? And let's see, there's Epstein, there's Virginia Giuffre, there's the French Epstein, who was a pimp of little girls. There was Caroline Angiano, and there was Leap Sky Patrick. That's 5 people. 3 of those Epstein victims, 3 dead. 1 is Epstein, and the other is his French counterpart, that they would trade little girls as young as 12 years old. He ends up dead. Wow. Are any of your clients worried about how people connected to this case are dropping dead like flies?
I got to tell you, Nancy, a couple of issues. First of all, the moment he was rearrested in New York when his plane landed, or New Jersey, at that moment, I did an interview shortly thereafter advising the general public he was never making it out alive. And, prophetically, he didn't. I was one of the first ones that said he wouldn't make it out alive. And frankly, I continue to be a disbeliever in the story that's been populated by the feds and the Department of Justice. There are just way too many connections here. I can also tell you exclusively, because I don't know that I've ever talked about this before, but shortly after he passed in jail, I received a call from one of the guards at the facility who had retired. This is somebody that wasn't working there at the time, but was able to speak with me on authority because he had worked there, and said, there is no way that someone within that type of a facility could have the opportunity to commit suicide. This is the most secure, one of the most secure prisons we have in the United States. It is a prison within a prison within a prison. It is 3 levels of high security, constantly monitored, and it was unbelievable to him that somebody in there would potentially be able to commit suicide. And then look at the photographs. This is a gentleman that was on suicide watch just a few weeks prior. And yet they give him sheets and they give him pill bottles and they give him wires. In the photographs, you can see all of the things that they gave him that potentially they could then use later to say, oh, well, look at all this stuff he used to commit suicide. It's just absolutely unbelievable. It's unbelievable to me. It's unbelievable to the victims I represent.
Hold on a moment. I want to follow up before I lose the thought. Spencer Kubin joining us, Chief Legal Officer, Gold to Law, who has represented 9 and counting Epstein victims. I've been in a lot of prisons and a lot of jails. A lot. More than I can even remember since I started prosecuting violent crimes in 1987. That said, Spencer, you're right. Never in any jail, any penitentiary that I have, any youth facility, a juvie jail that I have ever seen, did a cell have as much strewn around as the Epstein jail cell. When I saw that, I'm like, that's impossible. Inmates are not allowed all of those sheets, blankets, accoutrement. That doesn't happen. Why? Because it is a homicide-suicide risk. Those sheets can be torn into strips and used to commit a homicide. You do not see that in a facility. And the moment I saw that, Spencer, I knew it was wrong. That what we're showing right now, that would never happen. Anybody in the justice system knows this is wrong. No. N-O, Spencer.
This is top-level security prison, right? This is where we hold terrorists and high-level prisoners. You're absolutely right, Nancy. There is no way, and I've been inside jails as well in the work that I do on behalf of victims, interviewing people, and this is just impossible. It was impossible to believe when I saw it. It was impossible to believe on behalf of my clients. I couldn't believe it at the time, and my clients couldn't believe it either. It's just atrocious. And I want to bring you back. I've been representing victims going back to the original prosecution of this case in Palm Beach. I represented victim number 1. That was a 14-year-old girl that I helped walk through the criminal justice and then subsequently the civil justice system, which started the landfall of future victims of Jeffrey Epstein. And you said before, how many? I can tell you that in my contacts with the FBI during those investigations, there were literally hundreds of victims, hundreds of young girls who had been trafficked by Epstein and Maxwell. They were out there. And then there were more than hundreds that actually submitted claims when the funds were seized over in the Virgin Islands after his arrest. So the victims are numerous. The stories are voluminous. They involve high-profile individuals in the business community, high-profile politicians, royalty, you name it. Jeffrey Epstein had the goods on all of them. And there were a lot of people, I have no doubt, that were afraid of what he had to say.
I'm very curious as to why the documents are not being disclosed. Now, Dylan Howard, you suggest a nefarious relationship between Trump and Epstein. Many celebrities take photos that later they wish they hadn't taken. Photos alone do not indicate wrongdoing on behalf of Trump. But I will tell you what is a smoking gun to me. We were told the documents would be released. Now we're being told there's nothing to see. If there's nothing to see, why not release them? Who,
no, Nancy,
if anyone, is being... Go ahead, please.
No, Nancy, I'm not suggesting a nefarious link between Trump and Epstein. What I'm saying is that there has been a search for a nefarious link between Trump and Epstein. But I think that obscures somewhat the real crux of the matter here. And that is that there is significant intelligence in the hands of the Department of Justice and the FBI that has not been released to the American people. And we know that through various motions that have been put forward in various civil cases in which the SDNY, the Southern District of New York, has argued that the release of those Epstein files could, quote, reasonably be expected to interfere with a potential appeal of Epstein's
by Ghislaine Maxwell. I know. I've never seen prosecutors so worried about the interests of a convicted felon, i.e. Ghislaine Maxwell. And this goes back to before Bondi, the promise that these documents would be released and that any co-conspirator would be prosecuted goes all the way back to Attorney General William Barr.
This case will continue on against anyone who was complicit with Epstein. Any co-conspirators should not rest easy.
Yeah. That's from our friends at CBS. And apparently, all of the alleged co-conspirators are, in fact, resting easy tonight because apparently the files are not going to be released. I've never seen anything like it. And all my years of investigating and prosecuting, let's just remind everyone what this case is about. Listen to Virginia Giuffre, one of the 5 individuals who allegedly committed suicide connected to the Epstein case.
They said, take off your clothes. I had these little girl undies on, like little hearts on them, I remember. And they were laughing at that because they like that. The younger you look, the better it is. It turned very sexual, and it was abuse straight away from both of them.
I had been a runaway and I had been abused before. So to have this, ability to get educated and do something with my life, I thought I was turning around.
That's from our friends at Miami Herald and ITV News and Lifetime. Dylan Howard, that's what this case is all about. The trafficking and exploitation of what we now believe to be thousands of little girls. Now, why on God's green earth would we not want to release files about the desecration and the victimization of little girls?
Entirely correct, Nancy. At the very heart of this lies a very deep and disturbing question. If Jeffrey Epstein was operating a child sex ring, was he doing it for his own sexual proclivities, or was he doing it for a perhaps far more nefarious cause? And I think the answer lies there. As you pointed out, there are dozens of individuals whom have been linked to Jeffrey Epstein, but their names never been revealed as part of this so-called client list. Now, something else that Virginia Giuffre said, of course, she committed suicide earlier this year, was left in a diary that she wrote. And she said that she used to be filmed by Epstein's hidden cameras. And what we've learned is that Epstein's various properties dotted throughout the United States and his so-called orgy island had cameras in every room. They fed back into a central computer room where a classic blackmail and honey trap operation was being run. That, according to various sources whom I've spoken to over the course of the last decade. And what was the purpose?
And I'm guessing your point is that those videos exist and they have not been released. And speaking of video, now rearing its ugly head is the accusation that the jail video has been edited from the night of Epstein's death. His own brother refuses to call it a suicide. Listen to this.
Challenging AG Bondi's claim of 1 minute of Epstein prison video is missing due to a daily reset. Wired reports the video was cut together in Adobe Premiere Pro from 2 video files. If true, This contradicts the Justice Department claim the footage was raw. Metadata from the raw Epstein prison video shows approximately 2 minutes and 53 seconds were removed from one of 2 stitched together clips, and the cut starts right at the missing minute.
Please join us on our mission to find missing people, especially children, to solve unsolved homicides. If you're on the go, catch us on your favorite podcast app where you can get all of our content where we, in our own way, seek justice.
Jeffrey Epstein.
Is it true, sir, that you have what's been described as an egg-shaped
form, vague and definite, and I'm going to give you the first warning, Mr. Kubin, that these types of questions are not only argumentative, but directed in a manner to embarrass Mr. Epstein. If you continue with this type of question, I will adjourn the deposition immediately.
Sir, according to the police department's probable cause affidavit, one witness described your as oval-shaped and claimed when it was thick towards the bottom but was thin and small towards the head portion, and called it egg-shaped. Those are not my words. I apologize.
Jeffrey Epstein's deposition that we got our mitts on. Now, who in the world would have seen his and be able to describe it in such elaborate detail? It's referred to in police documents as a witness, which, of course, that witness is a victim. Who else would be speaking to police to describe Epstein's? That would be one document in the many, many thousands of documents that we are being denied. Now, if there's nothing in the files, why aren't they being released? Bondi promised they would be released, yet now an abrupt about-face. Joining me, an all-star panel, much of the suspicion of the government at this juncture has to relate to videos. Videos specifically taken in the homes of Epstein around the world, flight logs where he would apparently ferry celebrities, millionaires, and more back and forth to his so-called Lolita Island, where underage girls perform sex acts. But in my mind, I'm concerned more so about the video from behind jailhouse walls the night Epstein died. Now, keep in mind, there are 5 suicides connected to the Epstein investigation. Who are they? Number 1, obviously, Epstein. Number 2, his French counterpart, the French Epstein, who was accused and behind bars on supplying underage girls. Who else? Virginia Giuffre and 2 other Epstein victims, all who could have testified. So there's a spate of connected to the Epstein case, like in Russia. Whenever someone speaks out, they end up jumping off of a balcony or they're mysteriously poisoned. And we talk about Russia. There are 5 connected to the Epstein case. How much more does the government expect us to believe? And I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I've been on the side of law enforcement since the murder of my fiance decades ago. But this is clearly wrong. Let's talk about that jailhouse video. Listen.
In a deep dive into the metadata embedded in the video presented to the American people as, quote, raw, Wired published analysis indicating the file was assembled from at least 2 different source clips, saved multiple times over a period of more than 3 hours on May 23, 2025. The file was then created at 4:48 p.m. and last modified at 8:16 p.m. the same day and uploaded to the Justice Department's website, where the edited clip is presented as raw footage.
Dave Mack, Crime Stories investigative reporter who has poured through countless documents and interviews. Dave Mack, we first heard that there was a glitch in the video recording system where Epstein was housed behind bars. There were a lot of glitches that night, weren't there, Dave Mack? 2 guards on duty in view of Epstein. He could see them and they could see him. They didn't have to watch the surveillance video. Both of them either fell asleep or went online shopping at the time he committed. But it's not just 1 minute. There's not just 1 minute missing from the jailhouse video. Is there, Dave Mack?
Correct. Nancy, that 1 minute that Attorney General Bondi has been popping about the reset of the video at 11:58:58, saying that was because it was a 1999 system. Well, that might be explainable if that was the only problem here. But in total, 2 minutes and 53 seconds of video appears to have been manipulated and is missing. They're able to go in and look at these computer programs and how they're used. They can tell when you make a cut in the video and when you join 2 separate pieces together. They can look and see from your keyboard strokes everything that's been done, to the point where they're able to see how this piece of video was cut, how it was then saved, another piece is cut and saved, and then the 2 pieces are brought together. The problem is when you do all that and then present it as supposed raw footage.
And it was absolutely titled raw footage. Raw footage,
yes,
which
ma'am.
means unedited. But you could see the jumps, as we call them in this business, the jumps where video is spliced together. I mean, I'm not even an expert in that. I just know a little bit about it, but I happen to have an expert with me right now. Todd Shipley is joining us, digital cybercrime expert, former detective sergeant with the Reno Police, 25 years in LE, law enforcement, and author, Surviving Cyber Attack, Securing Social Media and Protecting Your Home, author of Investigating Internet Crimes. It goes on and on and on. His expertise is this. Help me out, Shipley.
Well, I think like everybody's already said, these are not the raw videos. I've looked at both of the videos that they provided for download, and neither video is the original video. They both have been edited. Now, does that mean it's not the real video? No, but they compiled both of the videos that they allowed for release and edited them using, commercial tools. So it's clear that the United States government did not provide us with the raw video that they promised.
The disturbing aspect is that, number one, the video has been edited of that night. That's the most disturbing aspect. But number two, that it was released to us titled raw video. A lot of excuses have been made about the glitch, but we are now detecting between 2 and 3 minutes missing from the jailhouse video. Now, if you look at that video, you see that only visible is the elevator and stairwell leading onto that particular cell block. Dr. Dwayne Hendricks joining me, former associate warden at MDC, former senior warden, U.S. Department of Justice. It goes on and on and on. Author, Who Are You? See It, Say It, Sees It. Dr. Hendricks, where's the video? I see the video of the elevator and the stairwell. That would indicate anyone coming in or off the cell block. But what about the people already on the cell block? The inmate neighbors and others on the cell block. Where's the video?
Well, they should have various angles in that special housing unit to show pretty much all the doors within that unit. Each institution is mandated to record at least 15 days prior to anything that goes on that unit. So when the investigators showed up, the after action team, they should have been able to see all the footage from the prior 15 days on that special housing unit. Now, in terms of the breaks,
Hendricks,
Hendricks. Go ahead.
I hear you talking about the 15 days prior to Epstein's death. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about that night. That's all I want. All I'm seeing is a door and an elevator. Right. about the other inmates, Hendricks? Where's the video? You alluded to other angles.
Mm-hmm. They should have been recording. And the staff in facilities, those communication technicians, if there were any issues with those cameras, they should have been aware of that. Now, when the after action team came, I think the after action team came within a few days after Mr. Epstein's death. That would have been something that would have been talked about immediately and right away. So I would beg to think in an after action report from the incident of his death or his apparent suicide, that would have been something that would have been definitely a major part of that investigation. So that's where that information will come from.
Joining me now is Joseph Scott Morgan. He is professor of forensics, Jacksonville State University, author of Blood Beneath My Feet, and he is the star of a hit podcast, Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan. Joe Scott, thank you for being with us. Don't you find it a tiny bit of coincidence that, according to experts I put on the stand, it takes a human between 2 and 3 minutes to die of asphyxiation, or less than 2 to 3 minutes. And the glitch in the video is about 3 minutes. Doesn't that bother you?
Of course it does. And I've worked deaths in jails over the course of my career in Atlanta and New Orleans. And one of the things that we talk about when we are investigating deaths within correctional facilities is who observed them? When was the last time they were seen? What are the points of observation relative to this? Because this is what it breaks down to, is that the government at this point in time is the caretaker of these individuals. They have assumed that role, and they did not have eyes on this individual during this period of time. There has to be door-to-door accountability for every second. And from a death investigation perspective, this should be a no-brainer. This should be something that is so easy to walk through. But as it turns out, Nancy, that arguably this is one of the most controversial death investigations of this current century that we're in right now. And it should be something that's very, very simple.
Information has not been released about the inmates in cells adjacent to Epstein in the days leading up to his death. There were 12 to 14 inmates near Epstein, but no information about who the inmates were, when the inmates were placed in the cells near Epstein, how long the individuals had been in jail, when were they moved, and where did they go. Mark Epstein says one of the inmates had been in the cell area for a time prior to Epstein's arrest and subsequent detainment, and another died after Epstein's death. No information is available about the other 10 to 12 inmates in the area when Epstein died.
U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi insisting there's nothing to see here, there's no client list, we're now not releasing the files. Okay, Bondi, you want to tell me that this name wasn't in the files? Listen.
I don't believe it's a picture of me in London, because when I go out in London, I wear a suit and a tie. That's me, but whether that's my hand or whether that's the position, I have simply no recollection. The photograph is taken upstairs, and I don't think I ever went upstairs in Ghislaine's house.
He couldn't even spit it out. Sweating profusely, shifting his chair. He's lying. You want to tell me that the name and the number of Prince Andrew of Wales, that one, is not in those files? I would bet everything I have that his name is in his files. And if his name is in the files, who else is in the files? The files we're not seeing because Bondi lied? That was from our friends over at BBC News, and there's more. Watch this train wreck.
And I've said consistently and frequently that we never had any sort of sexual contact whatever.
Joining me now, a veteran trial attorney, former felony prosecutor out of the Atlanta jurisdiction, Daryl Cohen. Daryl Cohen, if you or I had withheld information in a case, a felony case, we would be disbarred. We would be censured, Daryl Cohen. Of course, you know, in every case, the defense argues, oh, we didn't get this, oh, we didn't get that. This is on a biblical scale, Cohen.
Nancy, first of all, my philosophy of life and trial strategy is if you have nothing to hide, then hide nothing. So the question becomes, why is it being hidden? In terms of the victims, I understand withholding their names. As you have pointed out on the show, and many people have pointed out, there have been 5 homicides, 5 self-deaths. People have committed suicide. If these victims come out, if her name, whoever she may be, she may find that her life is not only ruined from before, but ruined for the rest of her life. So I understand that. But there is a way of explaining that, not hiding all of the evidence, not suddenly 2 different videos minus a minute, minus 2 minutes. It makes no sense. And so if you want people to have conspiracy theories, hide it, continue to hide it, and the theories will expand, expand, and expand. So what we need to have is transparency. I've heard the word, but the word has to be followed. Let the public know as much as you can. And if you don't let the public know why this person is not named, then you've got a problem. But let them know these were young girls. These were girls whose lives have forever been changed. And if their name comes out, it may be even worse.
In addition to alleged client lists, and again, it may not be a proverbial little black book. It could be names, phone calls, memos, emails, travel logs, video surveillance at Epstein's various homes and getaways to reveal or create a so-called client list. I don't expect the feds to open up a file and go, oh, here's 300 names. This must be the client list. It's not that easy. That's why we've got about 11,000 documents that need to be released. They're not. There's so many disturbing facts about this, not only the fact that many people, including Epstein's own brother, who does not have a pecuniary or money interest in the outcome, insist that this was not a suicide of Epstein. But there are five suicides in all. Straight back out to Dylan Howard joining us, investigative journalist. He is the author of Epstein, Dead Men Tell No Tales. Dylan, again, I want to thank you for being with us. You have researched this so heavily. 5 dead bodies, and they all, what a coinkydink, commit suicide before they can testify.
Wow. Indeed. Now,
detail,
earlier this year,
please.
Earlier this year, we saw the death of Virginia Giuffre, who is perhaps the most notable of Jeffrey Epstein's victims by virtue of the fact that she alleged Prince Andrew was one who raped her. But significantly, there was another death in custody, this time on the other side of the Atlantic, in Paris, a gentleman by the name of Jean-Luc Brunel, who was also accused of similar heinous crimes like Jeffrey Epstein. Now, here's the rub that makes this particularly interesting. Jean-Luc Brunel was the co-founder and CEO of a number of modeling agencies. Modeling agencies, of course, are known for their use of young women and underage women for major campaigns. Now, Brunel was found dead by suicide inside his Parisian jail. But this also opened up an entire other can of worms. And last week, in the US Senate, we heard that Jeffrey Epstein trafficked not only human beings, but more than $1 billion across various countries. We don't know how he amassed a fortune, an individual with little to no financial expertise, how he amassed such a fortune. And guess what, Nancy? He funded the modeling operations of Jean-Luc Brunel in Paris.
I mean, Dylan Howard joining us. Dylan, for Epstein's day job where he amassed millions and millions and millions of dollars, he basically had one client. He was like a wealth advisor. You know, trot on down the street to Wells Fargo and they'll have a wealth advisor, you know, to tell you what to do with your children's college fund, blah, blah, blah. That's what he did. He had one client. True, a rich client, but there's no way in HELL that he got all that money from wealth advising one client. I mean, did they think we all just fell off the turnip truck? Because we didn't. Where did all that money come from? And I want to talk to you about Jean-Luc Brunel, all right? He died behind bars, just as you said, but the circumstances surrounding his death have not been made public.
Three guests on this show who either knew Epstein or knew Trump have all used the exact same words to describe Trump and Epstein's relationship over the past week as we've been talking to them and you've heard them. And they have done this totally unprompted. So here is a former Trump business executive, one of Epstein's former girlfriends, and an Epstein accuser who says she had a troubling incident with Trump. They all said the exact same thing here on Out Front.
They were best friends.
They were best friends.
Was his best friend.
You heard them, and right there, Jack O'Donnell, Trump's former business associate, talking about what Epstein meant to Trump. These are people, right, who each met Epstein and Trump at different times, in different places, and just to state the obvious, in totally different capacities. And yet they all concur on this crucial thing. They say that when they knew them, Trump and Epstein were best friends. So in just a moment, I'm going to speak to Mark Epstein. He is the brother of Jeffrey Epstein about all of this. Out front now, Mark Epstein, the brother of Jeffrey Epstein. And Mark, you know, from what you know, from what you saw, how close was your brother to Donald Trump?
They were very close. They were good friends. Jeffrey used to sometimes tell me things that Donald said that were funny. I know Donald was in Jeff's office a lot back in the 90s. It's documented that Donald flew on Jeff's plane a number of times. I don't know if they ever checked, but I know Jeff flew on Donald's plane also. I don't know if they've ever looked at his flight logs. And they were good friends. I mean, I flew on Jeff's plane. It's known I was on a plane in 1999, flying up from Florida, and Donald was with us. You know, and we were all joking around. They were good friends.
So, you know, tell me about that. I know there was something on that flight that you remember about your brother and Trump. What is it?
Oh, it was a funny thing. We were talking, and well, stick a pin in that. A couple weeks or a week before that flight, I was talking to Jeffrey, and he told me that he was talking to Donald, and he asked Donald, "How come you sleep with so many married women?" And Donald's answer was, "Because it's so wrong." Now, amongst guys, it was a funny line. And then when we were on the plane a week or two later, Jeffrey asked Donald the same question. I know he did that for my benefit so that I could hear Donald say it. And Jeffrey asked him, "How come you sleep with so many married women?" And Donald said, "Because it's so wrong." Now, it's a funny line, but the answer is not the poignant part of the story here. The question is the poignant part, because for Jeffrey to ask him that question, number one, he would have to know that Donald slept with a lot of married women, so and he probably got that information from Donald. And
it
also,
implies a confidence.
That's not the kind of question you ask a casual acquaintance. You know, how come you slept with so many married women? That's a question you ask a good friend that you can get away with asking those kind of questions. So that gives you an idea of how friendly they were.
Yes, it does. It does. It certainly gives that perception. Now, okay, Mark, Trump admits they had a falling out with your brother. That's what he said happened. He has not shared what led to it. But here are some of the things that he has been willing to say about your brother. I want to play them for you.
I was not a fan of Jeffrey Epstein. I threw him out of a club. I didn't want anything to do with him. Jeffrey Epstein was not somebody that I respected.
That does not fit with what you're telling me, Mark.
Yeah, I understand it doesn't. But he's trying to cover his butt. I mean, look, I understand people trying to distance themselves from Jeffrey because of what he was charged with and the circumstances he found himself in. I understand that. You know, but I know that they were good friends, and I witnessed it myself.
You mentioned something a moment ago that made me think of this, you know, something that the White House told us yesterday. We talked to a woman who accused your brother of sexual assault, and she also talked about an encounter with Trump at your brother's office. This was in 1995. She found it disturbing. She said she told the FBI twice to look into people around your brother, including Trump. But she talked about this incident that she said happened in his office. And the White House, their response to us, Mark, they were categorical. They said, quote, the president was never in Epstein's office. Is that true?
That's just another blatant lie, because he was there. The people that worked for Jeffrey in his office, you can find them. They can testify that they saw Trump in Jeffrey's office on numerous occasions. You know, so for him to say he wasn't there, all I can say is that's just another lie.
So you talk about him as your brother, and you're you were on the plane together at that time. When did your brother first tell you that he was in legal trouble? When did you know anything about what he was doing?
It was about 2006 when he first got into trouble. You know, it's known prior to Jeffrey's death. You know, I hadn't seen him for 7 years, although we were always in touch, you know, communication with telephone or emails, but we just never got together. And for the 12 years prior to that period of time, from like 2004 until 2008, we only got together maybe a half a dozen times or so, but we were always in contact. And in 2006, Jeffrey asked me to come up to his place uptown. He wanted to talk to me. So I was uptown. I stopped by. I'm not uptown all that much back then. I live downtown, and I sort of joke. I say to go above 14th Street, I need a visa. But so I went to talk to him, and that's when he told me that he was getting in trouble for being with girls that were too young. He said he was stupid, but he wanted me to hear it from him as opposed to hearing it on the news or something. And that's when I first found out. In 2006.
All right, and the reason that this is so important is trying to understand what the people around Epstein would have known, separate from what any of them might have also been doing, right? So I guess the question here then, Mark, is did you have any suspicions before Jeffrey's confession to you that he was involved with underage girls?
No, because I rarely saw him, so I didn't know what he was involved with. You know, we had different lives. He had his friends, and I had my friends. We traveled in two separate circles, in a sense. A few people we knew together, but, you know, he was more in the financial community uptown. I was more involved with the arts community downtown. So we had two separate lives, but we were brothers. We always stayed in touch. You know, but the thing is, Aaron, the thing with the charges against him, you know, that's really not my concern at this point in time. Jeffrey is dead, so, you know, I'm not the prosecutor. I'm not his defense attorney. I'm more concerned with the circumstances around what I now consider his murder.
Right. So
that's unsolved.
So I want to ask you that, okay, because the Department of Justice issued that memo earlier this month, right? It's at the core of a lot of this that reads in part, and I quote, Mark, after a thorough investigation, FBI investigators concluded that Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide in his cell. Now, you say you were the one called to identify his body. You had conversations at that time, and you do not accept this finding.
No, I don't, because what they don't mention in the report, and no one says, is that, you know, after Jeffrey died, you know, the next day I had to go to, you know, number one, to identify his body because I'm the next of kin. There's only heir. And they did the autopsy then. And Dr. Roman, who was the city pathologist, it was her autopsy. And Dr. Bondi was there on my behalf because I had the right to have, you know, the family has the right to have their own pathologist there. And they did the autopsy, and they came out of the autopsy a couple hours later, and they both concurred that they could not call this a suicide because it looked too much like a homicide. They're very clear about that.
All right, Mark, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Have a good day.
Joining us now, NBC News national law enforcement and intelligence correspondent Tom Winter, NBC News White House correspondent Vaughn Hilliard, NBC News chief Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles, and Puck's chief Washington correspondent, familiar face around here, Leanne Caldwell. Tom, one thing I left out of that just now was the news about Todd Blanche visiting Ghislaine Maxwell in prison. What is he doing there?
Right. So this is something that's going to be set up according to statement not only from the Deputy Attorney General, but also from Maxwell's own attorneys who acknowledged that this contact has occurred and that it appears that initially they're going to have a discussion, just Blanche and the attorneys, and then from there they're going to have a discussion, Blanche and Ghislaine Maxwell. Maxwell. What they're going to get out of that, I'm not so sure. I mean, Epstein's been dead for almost 6 years now. The anniversary of his death is coming up in the next couple of weeks. And then as far as Maxwell, we had a trial. And I was in the hearing when Maxwell, the topic of a plea agreement came up. The judge asked the prosecution, said, has there been a plea offer in this case? They said no. And they said, in fact, neither has Maxwell requested one. So there was an opportunity there. I mean, if she had requested one, if she had other information. But I think at the time, as we reported at the time, Katie, there was not really a compelling case for cooperation because investigators believed that they had maxed out all other avenues as far as additional prosecutions and that there was nothing really there for her to offer prosecutors in terms of cooperation. But I got to say something. We've seen tweets and statements and posts about going to visit Ghislaine Maxwell. Now, in front of my name, it doesn't say detective. It doesn't say special agent, but I've been doing this job long enough, focused on law enforcement, to know that when you have victims, one of the things that you might do if you're going to go back and look at a case is to go back and speak to the victims. We have not heard about that. We've seen no statement about that from the Justice Department. And our colleague, Laura Strickler, just in the past hour, reached one of the attorneys for about 20 of the victims in the Epstein case, says they've never been contacted by anybody in federal law enforcement over the course of the last several months pertaining to this review. So it's really difficult for me to understand what is it exactly that Maxwell's going to offer that a group of victims who have, according to civil testimony, according to the testimony in federal court that convicted Maxwell, have testified credibly about what they say happened in the course of the years with Epstein and Maxwell. Why not go back and speak to them if you're going to try to see if there's anything to advance in the case?
Maxwell had something to offer for a plea agreement. Say she had knowledge of interactions that other powerful people had or wrongdoing that other powerful people committed. Wouldn't she offer that as part of a plea deal?
Exactly. I mean,
what is the conspiracy that she didn't because she was worried about her own safety? These are very, very powerful people.
I mean, at that point, if she had said, look, I did this sex trial, it purely as a hypothetical, I was involved in this whole thing. But what you guys aren't focusing on is high-profile person A, high-profile person B, high-profile person C, then that clearly would have been of interest for investigators, and that might have been worth a discussion. But that never happened. We've never heard about it in her filings. Her attorneys have never represented that. So where was this discussion before?
Yeah, it makes you wonder what they're going to come out with after this conversation, if anything.
But the thing is, though, Katie, on the victims, why not reach out to the victims? At the very least, tell them, here are the steps that we're going to do for you if there is another avenue for justice. That's the Justice Department's job. That's the very reason we got into this in the first place. There were a number of victims that sued the Justice Department saying you violated our rights as crime victims in this plea agreement. So the reason why we're here in the first place.
What's happening right now, this idea that Maxwell is somehow the victim? Is she being painted as a victim in some circles? I'm having a hard time following the conspiracy and who's arguing what lately.
Well, I have a hard time following it too, and I've covered this case for only about 10 years. So I'm not sure exactly what the thought process is. What I am sure about is there doesn't seem to be any indication publicly, and from our discussion with at least one attorney, of anybody picking up the phone and calling and caring about the victims in this case who have obviously been let down by the Justice Department in the past.
The ones who were taken advantage of and violated. All right, Ryan, let me ask you about Congress. What happened? Why is the Speaker sending everybody home early for their summer break?
Well, the biggest reason is, Katie, because he does not have unanimity within his own conference as to how to push forward as it relates to the revealing of information in this controversy. House Speaker Mike Johnson told us today, Leanne and I were both in the room when this happened, that there's no daylight between him and President Trump when it comes to what he described as transparency in this case, and he blamed Democrats for being the obstructionists in this. But that really flies in the face of the facts that it is Republicans that control the Rules Committee. They have a 9-4 advantage on the Rules Committee. If they wanted to dispatch or get rid of any amendment having to do with Jeffrey Epstein, they could do so. The reason they can't do it is because there are rank and file members of the House Republican Conference who do not believe the Trump administration has gone far enough in revealing information as it relates to this case. And you see the House Oversight Committee Chair James Comer echoing that sentiment. So the House Speaker can try and push this off. He can claim that it's Democrats that are responsible for all of it, but it's his own party that he has a problem with here. And if this was something that Republicans were completely unified on, he could bring a bill to the floor. They have the majority of the votes. They could either motion to table it or get it out of the way and not talk about it. He simply does not have that ability right now, which is why he's basically putting up the out of office sign on the House chamber doors and saying, we're going on our recess so that we don't have to talk about this for a month. The question is, what's going to happen when they come back? You heard Marjorie Taylor Greene say that this is the #1 constituent call issue that she's dealing with in her ruby red district. Is that what it's going to be like when they go back and talk to their constituents in these towns across the country? Are they going to get an earful from their voters because they're not doing enough on this? I think Republicans have tried to bury their heads in the sand for quite some time since the DOJ released that initial memo saying there's nothing to see here. It's clear it is their base that is upset about this. Yeah. There's no doubt that Democrats are trying to exacerbate that. I'm not going to deny that in any way, shape, or form. Democrats are picking at a scab for sure, but the problem exists within the Republican conference.
Yeah, Leanne, you saw that. You saw Thomas Massie holding up that binder. You know, if you build it, they will come. If you have the binder, you will get the information. How pervasive is the issue of Epstein? Is it just a Washington thing? Is it just Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massie demanding this? Or is it that Marjorie Taylor Greene is right, that this is the #1 call from her constituents, and that other lawmakers are feeling that as well, that the base, their voters, are the ones that are loudly demanding this?
Yeah, it's a question I keep asking these members because I'm trying to figure out the same thing, Katie. And when I talked to Marjorie Taylor Greene today, she said that this will absolutely be a political issue for Republicans too in the 2026 midterm elections. And she believes because so many of Republican-based voters care about this way too much if this is not handled correctly. And part of the reason, or a big reason, the House Rules Committee was so stuck, as Ryan mentioned, because Republicans did not want to vote over and over again against releasing this information. They didn't want to vote for a Democratic amendment, but they also didn't want to vote against releasing the information because they, I'm told, are being hammered by their constituents at home too. And not all of those Rules Committee members are from really, really conservative districts. There's some more moderate members on there. And so this does seem to be an issue that is not going away. Remember, part of the MAGA coalition was built in large part because Trump is a truth teller. He was the one who was going to break the deep state. And Republicans signed on to that and agreed with them and got behind him on that. And so now their constituents are expecting them to act.
Yeah. And
today, President Trump declared his intent to, quote, go after people for what he claims were attempts to interfere in the 2016 election by claiming that Russia was seeking to influence the result. The president insisted that former President Obama was guilty of crimes for what Trump said was his role in weaponizing intelligence.
The leader of the gang was President Obama. Barack Hussein Obama, have you heard of him? Look, he's guilty. It's not a question, I like to say, let's give it time. It's there. He's guilty. This was treason.
CNN's Kevin Liptak is at the White House for us. Kevin, it's notable this response came during a question about Ghislaine Maxwell, but can you fact check what the president is suggesting here?
Yeah, and just to underscore, these are very striking comments from the president. He's accusing Barack Obama of sedition. He said he was seditious. He's accusing him of treason. And he says, quote, whether it's right or wrong, it's time to go after people. Clearly, the president intent on using some of this information that was released last week by the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, to go after his political rivals, chiefly the former President Barack Obama. And just to step back and describe what Gabbard released, she released information that she says undercut that 2017 intelligence assessment that found that Russia, through a hacking and influence campaign, attempted to influence the result of the 2016 election. She seems to be relying on sort of correspondence that was sent between Obama officials that said that Obama wanted a new assessment into this. And what President Trump seems to be seizing on is the fact that an initial assessment found that Russia was not successful in influencing the results of that election. But both Trump and Gabbard seem to be twisting some of what the intelligence found. You know, the intelligence community found that Russia did attempt to influence votes through things like hacking emails, things like social media campaigns, but it never found that it actually hacked into voting systems and changed votes, even though it attempted to breach some of those systems. But President Trump seems to be using some of this new findings and documents that have been released by his intelligence chief to go very harshly after President Obama. And certainly it has always been true that the Russia investigation that really clouded the first 2 years of his first administration has long been in his head as an attempt to undermine his legitimacy. He has repeatedly called it the Russia hoax. Now the president seems more intent than ever on going after some of the people who he thinks were responsible for it. And just over the weekend, we saw him post quite a striking AI-generated video of President Obama in the Oval Office being arrested by FBI agents. Later, the video depicted Obama sitting in prison in an orange jumpsuit. So very striking imagery, very striking words from President Trump as he tries to use some of this information, one, to go after his rivals, but two, seemingly to try and distract from the Jeffrey Epstein matter. But I think bottom line, when he accuses Obama of treason, when he accused Obama of leading a coup and of being seditious, there's really no evidence in what Gabbard released last week that would back up any of those claims.
Yeah, certainly. Kevin Liptak, thank you so much, live for us from the White House.
I want to get a bit of a fact check of what Donald Trump just said at the White House from CNN senior reporter Daniel Dale, who joins us now. So President Trump made a lot of claims, Daniel, about former President Barack Obama. But what's the reality?
Well, President Trump has a long history of accusing former President Obama of committing crimes while not specifying how exactly those crimes were supposedly committed. So in this case, he kept saying Obama was caught, his name was on a document, didn't specify what Obama was caught doing, and did not say what document he was talking about. So it's a bit difficult to fact check, but I think there's a strong chance he's talking about something highlighted by a director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, that refers to an email post-election in 2016 where the member of the intelligence community said the president had directed the intelligence community to come up with a new assessment of how Russia had attempted to use tools to intervene in the 2016 election. So two things about that. First of all, that is post-election. That is pre-inauguration, but post-election. So it would not be an election rigging effort, as President Trump specified. And second of all, the president directing the intelligence community to assess Russian interference is simply not treason. There is very little there. Now, Tulsi Gabbard has alleged that that new assessment that was produced after that meeting, she said directly contradicted previous assessments. She did not prove that. And she is emphasizing the fact that that new assessment in January 2017 did not find that that previous assessment did not find that Russia had altered the election results, altered vote counts. Well, the new assessment didn't either. What the new assessment found was that Russia engaged in hacking operations targeting Democrats, had engaged in influence operations online to attempt to alter the results in favor of Trump to hurt Clinton. That is not contradictory as far as we know. And a GOP-led Senate Intelligence Committee review of this found that these conclusions were correct and that there had not been political interference by the Obama administration. So look, there continues to be analysis by this current administration of what happened back then. But what we have so far from Ms. Gabbard, from President Trump, simply does not come close to proving that President Obama committed any crimes here.
Okay, so in other news, Trump is accusing his predecessor of treason here. Just a moment of reminder, when Russia interfered in the 2016 election, as the intelligence community agreed quite broadly, there was bipartisan agreement that Russia did so. You had Republican and Democratic lawmakers saying quite clearly there's no question about Russian interference in the election. And just for folks who may not remember, They hacked emails from John Podesta, Hillary Clinton, and notably released those hacked emails right after the Access Hollywood tape came out. I mean, that's what part went into the assessment that this was attempted to advantage Trump. Intelligence community never found that they influenced votes or voting systems, etc. From a legal perspective here, is there any legal evidence grounding for a U.S. attorney to take up these referrals and actually prosecute?
Well, a U.S. attorney can take up whatever they want if it's handed to them, and frankly, they ought to. If they get a referral, there is not a serious case here for treason or sedition or whatever else. You know, Jim, from your long work overseas, that intelligence estimates or intelligence assessments are sometimes ambiguous. There are different opinions that can be made about them, but merely disagreeing with one or the findings of one or what's drawn from one is not treason, which is the act of, number one, seeking to overthrow a government, or number two, seeking to kill a sovereign of a nation. It's just silly. Now, can it be a hassle and a pain in the ass to the person who's investigated, who's got to hire a lawyer and go through all the motions? Sure, but this is not an investigation that would be grounded in any reality.
But when you have the president raising the prospect of using these levers, right? These legal levers of his administration, I mean, what is the risk in that? Just remind us.
No, you know what I think the risk is? It's public misinformation. I think people do not know what treason is or what sedition is or what any crime is. And they hear the words from someone in a profound position of authority who can get in people's heads and say, wait a second, I think those guys actually did try to commit acts of treason. So more than anything else, it's bad civics for the population that just doesn't understand these very hard legal questions.
There's that old saying that a prosecutor could indict a ham sandwich, right? If they go before a grand jury, essentially a one-sided affair. Right. Could you see at least reaching that relatively low level?
No, because in order, I mean, yes, by Saul Wachtler, former New York Court of Appeals judge, that a grand jury could indict a ham sandwich. You still have to get to probable cause, which is that it is more likely than not that a crime was committed. It is not more likely than not that Barack Obama committed treason. You don't have to like the president, you don't need to have voted for him, but let's be serious here about what the claims are. So no one's getting charged here for this.
Elliot, thank you so much. A lot going on, and certainly it was noteworthy that he talked about the one thing as he was asked about the other, so we appreciate it.
President Trump today angrily denounced the support of anyone in his ranks who cares about the Jeffrey Epstein case, aka a significant number of people in his base, who, by the way, elected Trump after he pledged to release the Epstein files, after his surrogate Elon Musk told Tucker Carlson that billionaires were backing Kamala Harris because they were terrified Trump would release the Epstein list. Now, this latest kerfuffle started this morning with Trump's post on Truth Social, where he continued to falsely assert that the Epstein files are some sort of Democratic ploy. He wrote, quote, "Their new scam is what we will forever call the Jeffrey Epstein hoax. And my past supporters have bought into this bullshit, hook, line, and sinker. They haven't learned their lesson and probably never will. Let these weaklings continue forward and do the Democrats' work. Don't even think about talking of our incredible and unprecedented success because I don't want their support anymore," unquote. This same energy continued in the Oval Office this afternoon, where the president said this.
They're wasting their time with a guy who obviously had some very serious problems, who died 3-4 years ago. I'd rather talk about the success we have with the economy, the best we've ever had.
It's, of course, not a waste of time to care about the fact that dozens, if not hundreds, of survivors of rape, assault, trafficking, and more have been denied justice in the Epstein case from the jump. Aside from Epstein's own vile crimes, Epstein allegedly helped other powerful people in his orbit get away with heinous actions, including sex abuse, sex trafficking, in some cases the sexual abuse of minors. Here's just one portion of a victim impact statement surrounding the trial for Epstein associate Ghislaine Maxwell, who was sentenced to 20 years in prison for conspiring with Jeffrey Epstein to sexually abuse minors. One victim, who went by the pseudonym Kate, wrote to the judge, quote, "I witnessed Maxwell's relentless and insatiable drive to meet the sexual needs of Epstein at any cost, to the vulnerable girls and women upon whom she preyed and fed to Epstein and other powerful men. The many acts that were perpetrated on me by Epstein, including rape, strangulation, and sexual assault, were never consensual and would have never occurred had it not been for the cunning and premeditated role of Ghislaine Maxwell played. Kate went on to write that the consequences of what Maxwell did have been far-reaching in her life, and this has been, let's just say it, this has been a huge about-face for Trump. He's the dog who caught the bus. On a podcast just last fall, he promised he would release the Epstein files.
But a lot of big people went to that island. But fortunately, I was not one of them. Yeah, I'd be inclined to do the Epstein. I'd have no problem with it.
Back in 2019, in Trump's first term, he retweeted a baseless conspiracy theory suggesting that Epstein's death was tied to Bill and Hillary Clinton. The Epstein case is sadly not a hoax, as the president now claims. So what's going on here? Let's go to CNN's Kristen Holmes at the White House. Kristen, Trump has gone from saying everyone should move on from Epstein to saying he doesn't even want the support of people who care about this. That's a lot of people. We should note that in the not-so-recent past, those who cared about this case have included his son, Don Jr., his Vice President, J.D. Vance, his Attorney General, Pam Bondi, FBI Director Kash Patel, and on and on. What's the thinking here?
Jake, I'm not really sure there is thinking behind this. A lot of this seems to be unforced errors by President Trump. I've talked to a number of people around him who do believe that they are understanding where the base stands, but it still seems unclear that President Trump realizes what a big deal this is to so many of his supporters. And just to give some clarity here, it's not just the people who voted for them. It's also the big personalities on the right and some really who had never voted before, now part of the MAGA movement, who drew in their supporters, people who have podcasts, YouTube shows, to get them to the polls to vote for Donald Trump in order to release the Epstein files. And part of this, what I'm hearing from these supporters, is they don't really understand why exactly he's made this about face. Here's what he said in the Oval Office today.
It's all been a big hoax. It's perpetrated by the Democrats, and some stupid Republicans and foolish Republicans fall into the net. And so they try and do the Democrats' work.
A couple of other things he said, that he has lost faith in certain people because of their belief in these so-called Epstein files, that the Republicans have been duped. Again, as you noted, some of the people who've been placed in the highest roles in his administration, I guess, are some of these same people who were allegedly duped by this quote-unquote Epstein hoax, as President Trump has said. Now, our colleague DJ Judd just caught up with President Trump as he was leaving an event and asked about whether or not he would appoint a special counsel or consider appointing a special counsel. He said he has nothing to do with it. And let's be clear, if someone was going to appoint a special counsel, it would, of course, have to go through the Attorney General's office. But as we have reported time and time again since Donald Trump took office, the Justice Department is operating the least independently that it has in modern history. So, of course, President Trump would have everything to do with a decision about a special counsel here, Jake.
All right, Kristen Holmes, thanks so much. Let's discuss this with two former Trump White House officials. Mike Dubke, former Trump White House communications director in the first term. Jim Schultz, former Trump White House lawyer. Jim, you've worked with Trump on a very personal level. Explain to us the mindset here and what you would advise him as his lawyer to say right now.
So in terms of what folks are thinking here, and you know, not to get to the crux of this, I think we need to be more concerned, less concerned about MAGA, more concerned about the victims associated with these cases.
I agree.
Right? When you saw people walking around with the binders outside of that, I thought I handled human trafficking cases on behalf of victims on a pro bono basis. I'm thinking, what are the victims thinking at this moment with people walking outside the White House, reporters with these binders purportedly containing information? They don't know what's in those binders. They don't know what's going to come out. And purportedly containing information, the trauma, we have to think about the trauma that those folks are going through, those women are going through, who had been abused, who had been purportedly trafficked, and you know what their reaction is to that issue. And I think we're losing all of that. The news media is losing it. The White House is losing it. The Attorney General lost it when they paraded around with those binders. And I think MAGA is losing sight of that too. And the Democrats in Congress are doing the same thing. They're politicizing something that's traumatic for folks. And this needs to be governed by and through the court system. And judges need to help make these determinations buy-in through the Department of Justice if it's something that's going to be released.
I totally agree with you, and that's why we interviewed the attorney for some of the victims yesterday, and why I already mentioned them. Mike Duggie, let me ask you, notwithstanding the point that Jim just made, this is now a political crisis for the president of some sort, at least with his base. Laura Loomer, who is a conspiracy theorist and somebody that I'd rather not even mention, but she has the ear of the president. I mean, she suggested some firings in the National Security Council, and he followed through. She told Politico that she worries that his handling of the Epstein case could consume his presidency. She said, quote, obviously this is not a complete hoax, given the fact that Ghislaine Maxwell is serving 20 years in prison in Florida for her crimes and activities with Jeffrey Epstein, who we know is a convicted sexual predator. Loomer told Politico. That's all true. This is why I said, and I'll reiterate it again, the best thing the president can do is appoint a special counsel to handle the Epstein files investigation. Again, that she sounds reasonable there. She's not a reasonable person, but still.
Well,
that
she's also a leader within this movement.
That's exactly
and so what she says on this topic matters.
Yeah.
And to Jim's point, this is a political story now, like it or not. The courts are almost secondary to what is happening. I frankly am surprised I'm not surprised that the president doubled down or even tripled down on this, because one of the superpowers of Donald J. Trump is that he runs into fire and survives almost every time. In this instance, though, he lit this fire. Well, he didn't necessarily light this fire, but he did stoke it.
Yeah.
And as did his supporters. But they stoked it for a really good reason, because a lot of what he won on, one of the reasons that his base loves him so, is because he points to powerful individuals that have been lying to the American people. That whole story, including now sex, is wrapped up in the Epstein case. So I am surprised that he's trying to be dismissive of this at this point, but I think he's playing to his strength, which is running into this. I don't think it will be successful. At some point, we're going to have.
If she's, as you say, a victim of a miscarriage of justice, then there would be no obvious reason why she would not want to cooperate with the authorities. Is your position, as her brother, is your position that these victims are all lying? There's a lot of speculation about whether Epstein was some kind of Israeli agent. Your father, Robert Maxwell, was also an Israeli agent, maybe also working for Mossad. What can you say about that? His brother, and he joins me now in the Uncensored studio. Ian, welcome to Uncensored. You're her brother, Ghislaine. So let me start by asking you for your reaction to two bits of breaking news today. The first was that the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, has directed for her deputy to go and see Ghislaine in prison. What is your response to that, first of all?
Well, you really have to ask yourself, why didn't the DOJ ask to speak to Ghislaine before they indicted her? Why is it only now? And the reason I say that is because in 2019, after Epstein died and up until Ghislaine's own arrest in 2020, she was, to the best of her knowledge and her lawyer's knowledge, not a target. She remained in the United States. They made her, Ghislaine, available for questions and kept on being said, she's not a target, she's not a target. Suddenly, bang, 60 officers come down on a house in New Hampshire where she was, huge show, this part of arrest and so forth, and then there is a disgraceful press conference organized by the DOJ's attorney in New York, and she is pointed at with a picture of Epstein, the subtext being, this woman is guilty. So we considered that all of that entire process was prosecutorial misconduct. And finally, they decided that they wanted to talk to her.
So you think it should have been done years ago?
Of course.
The second development is that the House Oversight Committee, Congress, has voted to subpoena Ghislaine. will she be willing, from your understanding, will she be willing to talk to both the Deputy Attorney General and to be deposed by the United States Congress?
Well, this has happened quite literally, and I've only heard it, as you have at the same time, in the last 5 minutes about the Republicans deciding that they're going to subpoena her. At the moment, Gillen's lawyer, David Oscar Marcus, has indicated that he is talking to the government to set up this originally requested meeting with Todd Blanche. Once this is going on, you need to be aware that Gillen is involved in multiple live legal proceedings. She has a live petition in front of the Supreme Court. The government has chosen to oppose that. The same DOJ that is wanting to interview her is opposing her simultaneously. It's quite an unusual position, but that is what the position is. So she has to respond and has to rebut that opposition. That's one set of proceedings ongoing. Then she has to decide how to deal with this particular request that's come in from the DOJ. Now we know that there's a subpoena request coming into Congress, which has to be considered. And in addition to all of that, she has a live, not yet live legally, but in the process of being prepared, motion, which is known as a habeas corpus motion, to be brought in front of the district court back in New York, in which she's entitled to bring new evidence that was not available at her trial, showing government misconduct prior to the trial, in the trial, and post the trial, including, for example, the now, as far as we're concerned, confirmed perjury of one particular juror who perjured himself in front of the judge at the hearing brought at her request as to why he did not disclose his prior sexual abuse on the jury selection form. So all of this is to say that Gillen didn't have a fair trial. That's the bottom line. And in order to be able to deal with all of these things, while simultaneously being in prison, and a damn dangerous prison it is too. So it's very, very hard to see the sequencing of all of this.
But if she's, as you say, a victim of a miscarriage of justice, then there would be no obvious reason why she would not want to cooperate with the authorities. I mean, particularly the chance to address Congress, for example, where the whole world would watch. And if she is as innocent as you say, then isn't that the perfect opportunity? I mean, why wouldn't she? I mean, if she doesn't do that, and she doesn't cooperate with the Attorney General's office, people are going to assume guilt, aren't they?
I don't think so. I think you have to you have to separate the agendas of everybody involved here. What is Gillen's agenda? She has been in jail over 5 years. She wants to get free. The reason she wants to be free is because the petition to the Supreme Court is one that says, I should never have been prosecuted because I was a beneficiary of the Jeffrey Epstein negotiated non-prosecution agreement. So her opening position is to say this should never have been brought.
But that's not the same as saying you're innocent.
Wait a minute. Well, the most important point is that if you should never have been prosecuted, you should never have been prosecuted. And I don't know what you have in mind when you say that.
Well, I simply say that would be a legal argument that you would be immune from being prosecuted. That doesn't mean automatically you're an innocent person. It just means that you may have been part of what many people think in relation to Epstein was a ridiculous farce in which somebody who clearly was a very predatory paedophile ends up getting an incredibly lenient sentence, albeit he remains a convicted paedophile. And so anyone associated with him in that case, if you were immune from prosecution, the court of public opinion is not going to view that as an assertion of your innocence. Summer is here and everyone knows to protect their skin from the sun, but what if you could also protect it from collagen?
Of government misconduct. From the start, she was unable to bring evidence in her own defense, on the one hand. And for example, I'll give you one example.
Well, she could have testified. She chose not to.
She was advised not to because her own defense was so, had been held below the water by the prosecution.
But after her conviction, she did appeal, and the appeals court rejected the appeal. So going to the Supreme Court is actually the next stage of the appeals process, but she's already had a court convict her, a jury. She's then had an appeals court of 3 judges uphold that conviction. Well, I understand. Listen, I would do everything I could for my sister.
Sure.
Let me be clear, okay? So I admire your attempts to get your sister out of prison, just on a human level. I understand it. And it must have been a horrendous thing for you as her brother to watch all this go down. You know, we've got a clip. She gave an interview to Talk Television, actually. We've got a clip from that.
They wake you up at 6. And you can go to breakfast, which consists of a cereal and a piece of fruit, generally. And then you have to make your bed sort of military style.
And it was quite a long interview, but I met her once at a book launch in New York. That she bore no relation physically to how she was then. I mean, just on a physical level, it's obvious what the impact of all this has had on her. But in relation to her innocence or otherwise, let's just get a few things on the table in terms of facts. From your understanding, when did she first meet Epstein? Because there is confusion about that. Some say it was an introduction by your father, Robert Maxwell, the publisher. Others say it was at a party or whatever. What's the truth?
My father was not involved.
Right.
Start with that. She met him, I believe, sometime in 1991. And either just before or just after our father died. And then was with him up until, I would say, sometime like late 90s, right? When you could consider they were
in a relationship,
an item,
right.
Correct. But this wasn't a relationship, a very standard relationship. They didn't live in the same home. He lived in his home, she lived in her home. She didn't have a key to his house. He didn't have a key to her house. So they lived, they were intimate, but he did not share with her in any way what he was doing at any given of the time of the day. So we know, because evidence was already available before the start of the trial, that there are emails written by Epstein to associates saying, do not show this to Ghislaine. Wait until Ghislaine has gone. Do not tell Ghislaine. So this is a very strange kind of situation. So I think it's entirely correct that the view of Ghislaine and Epstein was wrong in terms of the way that they interacted.
But in her court case, there were a number of people, not just the victims, but also housekeepers of various properties belonging to Epstein, who painted a picture of Ghislaine being his Miss Fix-It. She was the one that ran things. She was the one that couriered people around. She was the one that knew what he liked, even down to sexual peccadillos and so on. That she was, you know, almost acting like his madame, for want of a better phrase. And there were a number of people, many people, who painted the same picture, that she wasn't just some peripheral lover on the side who had no knowledge of his movements. She was, in many cases, planning his movements.
Well, we now know from grand jury transcripts of the 2007-8 indictment of Jeffrey Epstein, the first time, which were released only in December 2024, so just a few months ago, by Governor DeSantis, that there is significant differences of what witnesses said, including witnesses, 3 or 4 of them, that came to the 2021 trial of Ghislaine, and what they said in the 2006-7 trial of, indictment of Jeffrey Epstein. The defense were not provided those and could not therefore cross-examine the witnesses, including the women, the accusers, as to where this abuse took place, when this abuse took place. And it's critical because it goes to the ages of the girls in each case, not just isolated. And it goes to the veracity of core witnesses. And we know this, peers, because of this. Their juror number 50 turned out to have lied on his jury form.
You said that, yeah.
Now, it's not just that he lied on his jury form about his prior sexual abuse, but we know because he spoke to an independent journalist of The Independent about what went on in that jury room and what influence he personally had on other jurors, and crucially on bits of evidence and what was considered important by the jury and what was not considered important.
Okay, but let me just, for those who are not as familiar with the case as you obviously are, and I am, the women victims who testified, Jane, Kate and Carolyn were all pseudonyms. Annie Farmer testified under her real name. Testimony under oath from all these victims included Jane, who said that Ghislaine sometimes joined in on the sexualized massages with Epstein. Kate testified that Ghislaine has set up those sexual meetings. Carolyn testified that Ghislaine once touched her breasts, her hips and her butt, told her she had a great body for Epstein and his friends. She was 14 at the time, she said. And Annie Farmer, who did give her, or wanted to testify under her real name, testified that when she was just 16, Ghislaine massaged her naked chest at Epstein's New Mexico ranch in 1996. Is your position that they were all lying?
Well, my position is that Ghislaine was never given the chance to cross-examine them properly on their testimony based on...
I understand that, but that's a different...
Based
that's a different
on new
question.
Information
but that's a different
that
question.
was not available.
No, but that's a different question. Is your position, as her brother, who's obviously talked to her about this myriad times,
well,
is your position that these victims are all lying?
I believe my sister. She has consistently told the truth. Her lawyer just this morning said that she fully intends to continue telling the truth. And what's interesting is that as more and more things come out, more and more examples of misconduct come out, the truth of Ghislaine is also coming out. And therefore, the short answer to your question is that Ghislaine has denied all of this, and I believe that she's telling the truth.
But she stayed friends with Epstein after his conviction for being a paedophile.
No, I think the position is this. The relationship came to an end, I would say, around about 1999.
Right, but their friendship
in terms of an intimate relationship. Then in 2000, a key associate of Epstein by the name of Sarah Kellen was employed to do all of the arrangements of planes or whatever you will. The relationship between Ghislaine and Epstein at that point became essentially a professional relationship. And she was tasked with the renovations of his multiple houses and all that kind of stuff.
But how long did she continue to be friends with him? The ups and downs of the economy can be stressful and worrying.
It's hard to say. I mean, she was in a full-on relationship with a man called Ted Waite from 2003 to 2011. Certainly by the time of his conviction, I don't think that there was any meaningful continued interaction.
Look, my point is this. She stayed pretty close to him and friendly with him. I'm not saying what particular capacity, I accept they weren't lovers, but she certainly didn't distance herself or disown him, despite his conviction for procuring sex with an underage prostitute. So,
joining us now, independent journalist Philip Bump, senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, Elaine K-Mark, co-founder of the Lincoln Project, Rick Wilson, and author of the Red Letter on Substack, Tara Palmieri. Phil, first off, explain what Donald Trump's talking about. this conspiracy?
Yeah, I think it's important to start by saying it's garbage, which probably people take for granted, but it is. Essentially what happened is last week, Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, released a memo which alleged that the entire Russia probe was contrived, that it had been whipped up out of nothing in order to embarrass Donald Trump. And that's predicated on the idea that prior to the election, there is one email that they presented in which it is said, well, it probably isn't the case that Russia can actually change voting machines in order to affect the vote. Because that email exists, Gabbard is setting aside everything else that came up during the Mueller probe, during the Senate's investigation of what happened, and is saying, so therefore, after the election, when they said Russia was interfering, that was a lie, and it was a malicious lie, and it was an intentional lie. But of course, afterward, we weren't really talking about affecting voting machines. We're talking about how Russia...
We never were talking about it affecting voting machines. That was debunked really early on. Those voting machines weren't online, so Russia couldn't get into them.
And not only that, but the DNI at the time, on October 7th, 2016, released a statement saying, hey, Russia is trying to do this, but we don't think they can do it. So even the idea that this was a hidden thing before the election wasn't true. They released a statement about it on October 7th, which got overwhelmed by the Access Hollywood tape that same day. But all of this is absolute nonsense from the start.
So, Tara, Donald Trump's playbook there, I mean, I laid it out. I think it's also interesting that he's now...
muster. That's not to say that Cooper is markedly less evil, just that Owens is a uniquely terrible person in a way that's difficult.
Tonight, Obama fighting back, the former president calling out President Trump in a way that we have not seen before, slamming what he calls the, quote, bizarre and, quote, ridiculous allegations Trump made against him in the Oval Office just hours ago. So here's some of what Trump said.
The witch hunt that you should be talking about is they caught President Obama absolutely cold. Tulsi Gabbard, what they did to this country in 2016, starting in 2016, but going up all the way going up to 2020 in the election. They tried to rig the election. We found absolute, this isn't like evidence this is like proof, irrefutable proof that Obama was seditious, that Obama was trying to lead a coup.
All right, trying to lead a coup. Now, usually anyone associated with Obama just ignores all that. They don't respond. But that is not what happened this time. Obama's spokesperson responded in part, and I quote, out of respect for the office of the presidency, our office does not normally dignify the constant nonsense and misinformation flowing out of this White House with a response, but these claims are outrageous enough to merit one. These bizarre allegations are ridiculous and a weak attempt at distraction. Jamal Simmons is out front now, and the former Republican governor of Minnesota, Tim Pawlenty. All right, I appreciate both of you very much. So, Jamal, look, this is a change to come from Team Obama. It's a spokesperson, okay, but it's a change. And to come out and to speak like that, bizarre allegations are ridiculous and a weak attempt at distraction. Now, Trump said that Obama was trying to stage a coup, so that's what caused this. But what do you think, how significant of a departure is this for Obama to actually say, okay, we're going to respond?
Well, first of all, it's pretty rich that the man who was sort of affiliated with the January 6th insurrection at the Capitol is the one accusing people of trying to stage a coup. Obama, about a few days ago, came out and went after Democrats and said, it's time for Democrats to be, to speak up and to, not do so much navel gazing. He did that at a fundraiser. And so I think a lot of Democrats said, well, a lot of people are speaking up. They're marching, they're stepping up. And where are you at, President Obama? And so now I think we see President Obama stepping up too. And so he's stepping up and saying something to the American public. He refuses to sit back and allow Donald Trump to accuse him of leading a coup. And remember, it wasn't just what he said, Trump said in the Oval Office, President Trump said. He also released a video on his social media network showing Barack Obama being arrested in the Oval Office and carried out in handcuffs. It was an AI-generated video, right? Yeah. And maybe that was part of what prompted the actual response here. It is a change, all right? And it's a change coming from the former president. So it matters in that respect. And Governor Pawlenty, Speaker Johnson is now saying that he would not be opposed to subpoenaing Obama to testify before Congress over these allegations. Here he is.
We have no concern about that. If it's uncomfortable for him, he shouldn't have been involved in overseeing this, which is what it appears to us has happened. There's a lot of allegations on the table. Our job is to go and follow each of those trails and to find out the truth.
obviously, that's coming in the context of the changing of the topic going on in Washington, especially with Johnson away from Epstein. But Governor, I'm curious as to whether you think Obama now taking a sharper tone and stepping up as opposed to being quiet and trying to take the high road. Is it too little, too late, or does it matter for Democrats?
Well, of course, former governors, former presidents always try to be a little measured as to when and how they respond to their successors. President Obama has been pretty muted in that regard, with a few exceptions. But in this case, President Trump called him out directly, and President Obama answered the bell and swung back. Aaron, like you, I read the Mueller report. It basically concluded that the Russians did try to interfere with the election, but there was no actual proof of coordination in that regard. I'm not aware, nor have I seen any public reporting, that President Obama somehow ordered something inappropriate relative to that investigation. If Tulsi Gabbard or President Trump has that kind of evidence, then they should bring it forward. Otherwise, this seems like puffery.
All right. Well, absolutely. That, and certainly not helpful in the political climate we're in this country. But Jamal, Obama fighting back, and I hear the governor saying, look, this was specific, and something specific perhaps merited a response. And maybe we don't read into it an overall change. But there are so many in the Democratic Party saying, come on, where is the leadership? Who is going to be the standard bearer of that party? And someone who has certainly seems to be trying to take that on and testing different ways is Gavin Newsom from California, constantly going after Trump, after for a while tacking the other way to say, well, I'm going to talk to Bannon, I'm going to talk to all these people, I'm going to figure it out. But now he's posting things about Epstein and Trump, and he just said this about Trump and his immigration policies.
It's a weakness masquerading as strength. That's what I don't like about this son of a... I don't. And forgive me, I know he's the president of the States. Forgive me, I didn't, yeah, he calls me new scum. Come on.
So what do you think of that, Jamal?
Well, I think he's conflicted about how hard to go to use profanity. But listen, I think Gavin Newsom is the one Democrat I hear the most about from people who don't work in Washington and don't work in politics. And the reason why I think I hear about Gavin Newsom is because he's out there and really taking on Trump in a really forceful way. He'll go anywhere, Fox News or any other channel, and he'll do anything to kind of make his case. And I think a lot of Democrats are looking for somebody, it's not really about policy, but somebody who's got the attitudinal toughness who will take on Trump. We'll see how that works out. But what we have seen is in California, his poll numbers have gone up from 38% to about 56% because I think voters like to see him taking on Trump and not just sitting back and trying to find a middle road.
Do you think Gavin Newsom has it right, Governor?
I think Governor Newsom is an energetic and gifted communicator, but his policies suck. I mean, can you imagine him running in Pennsylvania and Ohio and Wisconsin and places that are going to decide the next presidential election? He's got a long history of ultra-left policies in California and in San Francisco, and I just don't see how that's going to sell nationally, notwithstanding his gifted oratory skills.
Gifted oratory skills, of which he has. I don't know if calling someone a son of a you-know-what might go in that category, but he does have those skills, whether you count that or not.
Aaron, are we in the policy era? I just don't know that we're in the policy era anymore with Donald Trump. I think we've moved to a different phase of the game. And I think this phase of the game, frankly, is not that nice.
No. Well, that's...
Although if you look at why Trump, Aaron, when you look at why Trump won the last election, besides his oversized personality, inflation, immigration, crime, wokeness run amok. Those are policies.
Right, that fed into the personality. All right, thank you both. I appreciate it and see you both soon.
We here at the Arena just got a statement in from the former president's office, and we're going to read that to you. So they say this, quote, out of respect for the office of the presidency, our office does not normally dignify the constant nonsense and misinformation flowing out of this White House with a response. But these claims are outrageous enough to merit one. These bizarre allegations are ridiculous and a weak attempt at distraction. Nothing in the document issued last week undercuts the widely accepted conclusion that Russia worked to influence the 2016 presidential election, but did not successfully manipulate any votes. These findings were affirmed in a 2020 report by the bipartisan Senate Intelligence Committee, led by then Chairman Marco Rubio. That comes from Patrick Rodenbush in President Obama's office. So, Kristen, I feel like I'm flashing back to when Trump was helicoptering to New Hampshire and Barack Obama was at the podium releasing his birth certificate, because it really does seem like we have been transported back to that time because President Trump doesn't want to talk about Jeffrey Epstein anymore. What is your latest reporting?
Yeah, that's true. And President Obama might want to get ready to continue to respond, because I am told that this is just the beginning of what Gabbard intends to release, that there are more documents more related to Russia. So this might be an ongoing theme. Now, President Trump, both publicly and behind the scenes, has been complaining about why exactly everyone wants to keep talking about Epstein. Just moments ago, he posted this on Truth Social. He said, "We had the greatest 6 months of any president in the history of our country, and all the fake news wants to talk about is the Jeffrey Epstein hoax." It has been obvious that President Trump wants to talk about literally anything but Jeffrey Epstein. He has pushed conspiracy theories. He has discussed various accomplishments in office. He has put videos on social media that have literally nothing to do with anything going on in the country currently. But nothing was more clear than when President Trump was asked specifically about this unsealing of the grand jury documents and the fact that the Department of Justice wanted to sit down with Maxwell. Take a listen.
Yeah, I don't know about it, but I think it's something that sounds appropriate to do, yeah.
Do you have any concern that your Deputy Attorney General, as your former attorney, would be conducting the interview, given...
No, I have no concern. The witch hunt that you should be talking about is they caught President Obama absolutely cold, Tulsi Gabbard. What they did to this country in 2016, starting in 2016, but going up to 2020 in the election.
And Casey, one thing to note here, this has put the situation, this case, this investigation, and the memo from the Department of Justice has put the White House in a position it doesn't often find itself, which is on the defensive. Now, they had a brief moment where they felt like they were bringing the MAGA base together at the end of the week last week with that Wall Street Journal story, with the fact that they sued the Wall Street Journal. They saw the different members of the base coming to President Trump's defense, but it seems as though that is waning, because what we're hearing from these MAGA loyalists and from these Republican lawmakers is they want more information and they want it quickly. One of the most interesting things I heard actually came from our Manu Raju up on the Hill, who was talking to Republican Senator Josh Hawley yesterday, who said his constituents are calling him and that they want more information about Jeffrey Epstein. So not going away anytime soon, Casey.
Jeffrey Epstein now threatening to derail Trump's agenda. On Capitol Hill tonight, Epstein is front and center. Several Republican holdouts are saying they will not move forward on a vote on Trump's DOJ cuts unless they get Epstein too. And House Speaker Mike Johnson's back is up against the wall because the House faces a Friday deadline at midnight. So we're counting down here to act on Trump's cuts to the government funding package. And GOP holdouts say that their constituents are the ones that are demanding answers on Jeffrey Epstein, as MAGA media is not letting up.
Trump has done a F-. I mean, my God, it's worse than an F. I mean, it's like a 0 on the Streisand affecting and not having clarity and flip-flopping back and forth. It's just been horrifying.
Trump did this to himself. And it's not even about, let's say, Epstein hooking him up with some hot 20-year-old 40 years ago. It's the fact that he came out and insulted his base and said it was a hoax. And so the whole thing is just crazy, and I don't want to get into all of it now. We'll get into it coming up, but it's just going to get worse.
All right. The man you heard speaking right there at the end was someone who spent time in jail because of his role leading up to January 6th. All right, so the people who are saying this aren't people who were on the fence about Trump. These are the people who vaulted Trump back to the White House, like Nick Fuentes, the white nationalist whom Trump has hosted at Mar-a-Lago.
And now he says, if you're not on board with the Epstein cover-up, oh, I don't want your support. You're a weakling. You. You suck. You are fat. You are a joke. You are stupid. You are not funny. You are not as smart as you think you are. We are going to look back on the MAGA movement as the biggest scam in American history.
I mean, to think that those words came out of his mouth, they're going to look back on the MAGA movement as the biggest scam in American history. I mean, these are people who made their names on the MAGA movement, inside the MAGA movement, by support of Trump. And their attacks are heard by millions and millions. And then there's Elon Musk, who's also stepping up his calls for more information. Today, he posted this, "Where's phase 2?" And alongside that was a picture of the Epstein files, phase 1. Now, the White House is doing all that it can to make this story go away. In fact, the administration's completely trying to change the subject. They'd rather talk about Trump's swollen ankles, for God's sake. And the Attorney General today went to Alcatraz, Pam Bondi touring the 91-year-old former federal prison because of Trump's desire to transform that national park back into a prison. And following Bondi, the pro-Trump network, Fox News, California's Governor Gavin Newsom's office responding with a statement to that, saying Pam Bondi will reopen Alcatraz same day Trump lets her release the Epstein files. So, well, if you listen to the White House, though, there is no desire at this moment to release more information on Epstein.
It was this president who directed the Department of Justice and the Attorney General to do an exhaustive review of all files related to Jeffrey Epstein, which they did. They spent many months going through all of the files related to Jeffrey Epstein, and they concluded what they found in that memo, which they drafted and they released. And so the president has been transparent.
Of course, all those questions still remain. Nothing of all the rich and powerful people who associated with Epstein over so many years, there's absolutely nothing for anyone to see. Let's go to Manu Raju live on Capitol Hill. I mean, Manu, what you are watching unfold on Capitol Hill, GOP versus GOP when it comes to a signature bill Trump wants to pass and
Daily Wire, and this is the description that she offered about me, which I must confess did make me chuckle. She writes, Owens brings a blend of loony energy and sincere malevolence that Cooper can't quite muster. That's not to say that Cooper is markedly less evil, just that Owens is a uniquely terrible person in a way that's difficult to replicate. It's beautiful. I love it. I don't know what.
I want to bring in NBC's Garrett Haake at the White House. Michael Schmidt is the investigative reporter with the New York Times who wrote about Epstein's accuser. Sarah Ellison is the democracy reporter at the Washington Post. And Reed Galen is an independent political strategist and co-founder of the Lincoln Project. So, Michael, this incident that you write about being, was allegedly happened in 1995. Tell us more about it and what made this former employee go to the FBI in the first place.
Oh my gosh, I was 14 years old. Like, what the hell do you know when you're that young?
Jennifer Arose grew up in New York with dreams of becoming a Broadway actress. She was thrilled when she was accepted to a performing arts high school in the city. And it was outside that school back in 2001, she says, a woman first approached her.
She was definitely trying to get to know me, trying to find out, where I was from, where I grew up, who I lived with.
Arose says the woman kept showing up, talking to her, sometimes offering to buy her lunch or a soda.
The first time she brought up the name Jeffrey Epstein, how did she describe him to you?
Dave was just a great guy. He's just saying, he's helped me. I've struggled. She was similar to me.
Did she say he could help you with your career?
That was a big part of it.
And when you think of her now, you used the phrase, you said the recruiter. You felt like she was looking for someone for him.
100%, yeah.
Arose says the recruiter brought her to Epstein's townhouse, just blocks from the school.
When you first met him, what did you think? What did he say?
Very nice. Basically saying that, he's heard a lot about me. The recruiter was talking such nice things.
Arose says she was served wine in Epstein's kitchen, and they talked. When she left, she says she was given $300 and was repeatedly invited back.
The secretary would contact me
and say,
are you free? Can you come by? Epstein would like to see you.
She became familiar with the eccentricities inside Epstein's home.
There was a lot of artwork that had insinuated nudity with women. And I remember
suggestive?
Very suggestive. We had a bathtub that was kind of opened, and there was prosthetic breasts that he could play with while he was taking a bath, I guess. It was very odd. And the painting that was literally right the massage table would be here, and this painting would be right here. And it was a very pretty naked woman, and he used to always say that I look like her.
She says after a few weeks of visits, she was escorted alone to what she says Epstein called his favorite room in the house, the massage room, and things turned physical.
In that moment, it didn't...
At that moment, yes.
Strange to you.
But at the same time, I was scared too, because I didn't know if he would get angry, or so I kind of just followed. I would have just my underwear on, because that's how he liked it, so. And I would just get massages back, and then he would potentially later on turn over and play with himself. And he would also like when I would play with his nipples. He used to get turned on by that. And then he would finish himself off, and then that would be the end of it. And he would still give me the 300, you know, and normally I would either get it from the secretary, would leave it in a drawer in the massage room.
How often do you think
it was
you
like
were there?
Yeah, like once a week, twice a week, my freshman year.
Did you ever tell him your age?
I told the recruiter, I've mentioned it in front of him, yes.
You're 14 years old?
Yeah, he knew very well my age. He knew exactly, you know, who he was hanging out with, you know. I don't think he cared.
When Rose turned 15, she says things took a turn.
You know, just take your underwear off and get on top. And I said I didn't want to. And he, you know, very forcefully kind of brought me into the table, and I just did what he told me to do. I was really scared. I didn't necessarily think that he was, you know, going to rape me.
Did he hold you there?
Yeah.
No question in your mind, he knew you did not want that to happen.
Oh, yeah. No, he definitely, yeah. There was no way. I was like, I don't want to say I was screaming or anything of that nature, but I was terrified, and I was telling him to stop. Please stop, you know?
And did he?
No, he did not stop. He had no intentions of stopping, and that's what he wanted, that's what he got.
When you left there, you never went back?
After that day, no, I never went back. I was terrified. I was really scared, because I didn't want that to happen again.
And you left school. Did you leave the school because it was in the same neighborhood?
Yeah, it was so close.
In your mind, did you use the word rape? Did you recognize it then as rape?
No, I don't think I did. I just thought, like, you know, it's my fault. Like, I was, like, obligated. Like, that's just what you're supposed to do. So I really did not know better.
When did you stop blaming yourself?
It was a long time, really.
Rose says Epstein's staff continued to reach out to her for more than a year, but she did not respond. She says she didn't immediately tell anyone, including the police, something she says she now regrets.
Did Jeffrey Epstein rape you?
Yeah, no, he raped me. Forcefully raped me, knew exactly what he was doing. And I don't think cared. What hurts even more so is that if I wasn't afraid to come forward sooner, then maybe he wouldn't have done it to other girls. I feel really guilty. To this day, I feel really guilty.
Rose says she suffered from crippling anxiety, depression, and panic attacks for years until she finally confided in her mother, her then boyfriend, and 2 close friends. 3 told NBC News that she first told them about her interactions with Jeffrey Epstein a decade ago, the 4th about 6 years ago.
Have you ever tried to reach out to prosecutors and tell this story?
No, I did not. I was just too scared. I didn't really want to go, you know, public with it.
You intend to file a lawsuit. What would you say to those who say a civil suit, lawyers, this is about getting money?
You know, he hurt me badly. I prefer not to go through this. So, you know, this is one way for me to get justice.
What does it take to find the courage to speak and tell your story?
It's a lot, even though maybe I don't.
This morning, the Trump administration is facing more fallout from their handling of the Jeffrey Epstein case. Calls growing louder within Congress, for one, for Ghislaine Maxwell, the longtime Epstein associate who was convicted of child sex trafficking offenses related to the investigation, calling for her to testify about what she knows. Conversation now around that. And now attorney Alan Dershowitz, who was once an attorney for Jeffrey Epstein, says that he believes Maxwell would be willing to testify before Congress if given use immunity.
She knows everything. She is the Rosetta Stone. She knows everything. She arranged every single trip with everybody. She knows everything. And if she were just given use immunity, she could be compelled to testify. I'm told that she actually would be willing to testify, and there'd be no reason for her to withhold any information.
Adding to the spectacle now, after that, a source close to Maxwell told CNN that she has not had any discussions about testifying before Congress, and also that Alan Dershowitz has had no contact with her. Joining us right now, CNN senior legal analyst Ellie Honig for much more on this. Let's start with this piece, and then I want to ask you more about what could be released with all these calls of having more of the investigation released. You are skeptical that Maxwell would agree to testify before Congress. Why?
Yeah, I'm extremely skeptical, Kate, despite whatever Professor Dershowitz says. So first of all, if Ghislaine Maxwell was willing to come clean and testify truthfully, why would she not have done that at any point in the last 4+ years while her prosecution was ongoing? Because had she tried to testify and cooperate at any point during that time, she would have been in position potentially to help herself. Instead, she refused to talk. She went to trial. She got convicted. She got sentenced to 20 years, and she has made no indication of willingness to talk.